The marble-clad lobby, usually a gleaming symbol of corporate power, now felt like a mausoleum. I stood petrified amidst the skeletal remains of my professional life. 3 bulging garbage bags. My potted succulent, a defiant emerald against the stark white plastic, peeked pathetically from one, scattering soil like fallen dreams onto my framed achievement certificates. My wireless mouse clung to the precipice of its cord from another, a desperate plea for freedom. "You're 25, Alara," Serafina Thorne's voice, usually a silken whisper, now cracked like a whip across the hushed expanse. A viper smile played on her lips as she tapped a perfectly manicured nail against the polished silver of her watch. "We're downsizing. Get out. Now." I had barely cleared the revolving doors, my carry-on still trailing behind me like a wounded shadow. The overnight flight from Polaris City had left my eyes burned with the grit of a desert storm, my mind a fractured mosaic of exhaustion. 12 hours ago, I'd been forging a pact with Julian Blackwood, CEO of the largest shipping conglomerate in the Southwest, a contract that promised a dynasty of wealth, secured after 3 days of relentless, mind-bending negotiations. Behind Serafina stood a phalanx of my former allies, Kale from accounting, Lena and Silas from marketing, and Damien from legal. Their expressions ranged from stunned horror to a morbidly amused fascination. Damien, ever the opportunist, allowed a slow, predatory smirk to curl his lips, his eyes darting between Serafina and me like a vulture observing a particularly juicy reality show confrontation. I don't understand. I managed, my voice a mere tremor against the cavern's indifference. The security guard at the front desk pretended to be engrossed in his screen, but his eyes flickered up, drawn by the raw spectacle. "It's simple, Alara," Serafina continued, her voice gaining an edge of chilling satisfaction. "The company is restructuring. Your position has been eliminated. Everything you need is in these bags." The grand front doors swung open, admitting 2 women, oiled sharks in their tailored suits, who paused, instantly captivated by the unfolding drama. Their presence drew even more attention to my abject humiliation. A cold sweat pricked my hairline, a crown of thorns. "But the Blackwood account," I began, the words catching in my throat. "I just finalized it. It will handle all client transitions." Serafina's words, sharp as shards of glass, cut me off as she casually checked her phone. "The separation paperwork will arrive by email. Your building access has already been terminated." Instinctively, I reached for my key card, a phantom weight against my hip. It was still upstairs on my desk, alongside the meticulously compiled notes for Monday's crucial presentation. "My laptop has all my files," I blurted, a chilling wave of dread washing over me. 3 years of work, my contacts, my very existence, all company property. Serafina's smile thinned, a predator's grimace. "It has already scoured your personal files onto a flash drive." She nodded toward the smallest garbage bag, a grotesque offering. "Everything else belongs to us." Lena, from marketing, at least had the grace to look like a ghost. Silas, ever the strategist, drilled his gaze into the pristine marble floor, as if searching for the secrets of the universe within its tiles. "You can't be serious," I whispered, the crushing weight of reality beginning to sink its claws into me. "I've been here 3 years. I deserve." "You reap what you sow, Alara," Serafina interrupted again, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "Perhaps you should have remembered who truly runs this department before getting so familiar with our clients." The accusation struck with the force of an Arctic gale. I had done nothing wrong except excel, to pour my very soul into my work. I was undeniably, tragically, good at my job. "You have 15 minutes before I call security," Serafina declared, checking her watch again, a theatrical flourish. "I suggest you don't make this more embarrassing than it already is." The crowd swelled as people streamed in for the workday, a hungry audience gathering. Some slowed their pace, craning their necks with morbid curiosity, like rubberneckers at a highway accident. Others hurried past, feigning indifference, unwilling to make eye contact. I stood there, jet-lagged and disoriented, my life, condensed into grotesque, bulging sacks of refuse, piled at my feet. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, 3 years of canceled plans, 3 years of being the first to arrive and the last to leave. I bent down, struggling with the awkward, weighted bags. No hand reached out from the sea of indifferent faces. When I finally straightened, balancing all 3 bags, attempting to salvage a sliver of dignity from the wreckage, I caught Serafina's expression. A fleeting flicker of pure, unadulterated triumph. That's when I knew. This was no mere corporate culling. This was a vendetta. A meticulously orchestrated execution. I shouldered my way through the lobby, past the staring faces and the chorus of hushed condemnations. The weight of the bags strained my flight-stiffened muscles. Halfway to the exit, my meticulously organized planner slipped from the top bag, its pages fluttering open to reveal color-coded client notes and meeting schedules stretching months into the future. I left it there on the floor, a vibrant splash of discarded dreams amidst the chaos. Outside, in the cold concrete labyrinth of the parking garage, I somehow managed to stuff the bags into my trunk. I slid into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Through the windshield, I could still see them all, a cluster of shadowed figures in the lobby, watching me through the glass doors. I started the engine. And then, instead of the expected torrent of tears, the primal scream of a wronged soul, or the furious roar of burning rubber, a quiet, knowing smile bloomed on my lips. It wasn't forced or fake. It was calm, knowing. I gave a serene, almost benevolent wave to the figures in the lobby, shifted my car into reverse, and drove away. None of them realized what they'd just done. But they would. Oh, how they would. The reckoning was merely deferred. My name is Alara Vance, and until 3 hours ago, I was the senior client relations specialist at one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the city. I wasn't always the meek, diligent cog they'd just cast aside like forgotten refuse. Growing up in a tiny apartment above Lena Vance's struggling atelier, I learned to fight for every breath, every opportunity. My mother, with her weathered hands and a spirit forged in fire, had drilled into me that education was my sole escape route. Forge yourself into an unignorable force, my lioness, she'd say, pinning hems until midnight. I'd won a partial scholarship to university and worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. 4 years of sleeping 5 hours a night, fueled by sheer will and lukewarm coffee, while maintaining a 3.9 GPA, earned me my degree and the avid attention of several recruiters. When the offer came from Serafina's firm, it had seemed like a gilded promise. Healthcare benefits, a retirement plan, a salary that meant my mother could finally lay down her needle. I drove aimlessly after leaving the office, a phantom limb of a life that no longer existed. My mind struggled to process the seismic shift. The Blackwood Pact. I had nurtured that relationship like a fragile, precious bloom, spending months cultivating trust, delving into their operations, understanding their deepest pain points. I knew the names of Julian Blackwood's children, remembered his assistant's birthday, and had custom-designed a solution that addressed every concern their board had raised. Serafina had merely glided in on the currents of my effort, her name appearing first on all the proposals. That was our unspoken, poisonous symbiosis. I did the work. She took the credit. And the company prospered. Until today. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot, the asphalt a bleak landscape under the fading sun, and finally let myself rupture. The tears came in silent, agonizing waves. I wasn't crying because I'd lost my job. I was crying because I had been defiled. My phone buzzed with messages from concerned colleagues, not the ones who'd stood behind Serafina, but the ones who worked in other departments, the silent watchers. Whispers, swift and cruel, permeated the corporate arteries. What happened? Are you okay? This doesn't make sense. I ignored them all and dialed my mother instead. They fired me. I choked out when she answered. Her silence was a universe of understanding. Then come home, my lioness. I'll make tea. Lena Vance's tea couldn't fix this abyss, but her tiny house in the suburbs was exactly where I needed to be. away from the gleaming office tower with its marble mausoleum lobby and glass doors, away from Serafina and her watchful, predatory eyes, away from the humiliation. I spent that first day in a fog, recounting the story to my mother, who listened with narrowed eyes and pursed lips. "Something doesn't add up," she finally said. "Why now? After you just secured that titan of a client." The question haunted me as I lay awake that night. Why now? The timing made no sense unless someone didn't want me there for the aftermath of the Blackwood deal. The next morning, I forced myself to review the termination paperwork that had arrived by email. The legal language was a frigid, impersonal epitaph: reduction in workforce, at-will employment, 2 weeks severance. Nothing about my achievements or contributions, nothing about the true reason behind the sudden decision. At the bottom of the email was a non-disclosure agreement and a non-compete clause that would prevent me from working with any of the firm's clients for 12 months. I almost signed it automatically, a programmed automaton to the very end. But something stopped me. A memory surfaced, sharp and chilling, from 2 weeks earlier. I had stayed late to prepare presentation materials for the Blackwood meeting. The office was nearly empty when I heard voices from Serafina's glass-walled office. The door was partially open, and Serafina was speaking to Kale, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet space. "Alara is becoming a problem," she'd said. "The clients are asking for her directly now. Blackwood specifically requested her for the Polaris City meetings." "So, what are you going to do?" Kale had asked. "I've already done it," Serafina replied, a chilling finality in her tone. "Anya starts next month. Her father and I share a long-standing alliance. She'll take over Alara's accounts." "What about Alara?" Kale had queried, a flicker of concern. "She's young. She'll bounce back." "Besides," Serafina had added, a smirk in her voice, "technically, we're downsizing her department." They'd laughed then, the sound slicing through me like a premonition. I'd gathered my things and slipped out, convincing myself I'd misunderstood. Surely, my stellar performance would protect me. Now, staring at the non-compete agreement, that conversation took on new, sinister meaning. I wasn't fired because of downsizing. I was fired because I'd become too valuable. Because the clients preferred me to Serafina. My very competence was a direct threat to her fragile dominion. I closed the email without signing anything. That's when my phone chimed. An unfamiliar number with our city's area code. "Is this Alara Vance?" a man's voice asked when I answered. "Yes." "Who's this?" "Julian Blackwood. We met in Polaris City. I've been trying to reach you through your office, but they're obfuscating. Something about you being no longer with the company." My heart raced. Julian Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Shipping, was calling me personally. "That's correct," I said carefully. "As of yesterday." "Well, that's downright strange timing," he replied, a hint of steel in his tone. "Especially since I specifically told your boss I wanted you as our point person moving forward." The pieces clicked into place, forming a horrifying picture of deceit. "Mr. Blackwood, Julian, please." "Julian," I corrected, my voice betraying nothing. "What exactly did Serafina tell you about my departure?" His answer sent a glacial shiver down my spine. "She said you'd accepted another position, that you'd left them high and dry right after the contract signing." He paused. "But that didn't sound like the woman who spent 3 days helping us navigate our restructuring. So, I decided to call you directly." Serafina had woven a tapestry of deceit for a titan of industry about me. "I was terminated yesterday," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "when I returned from Polaris City." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably before Julian spoke again. "I see. Well, this certainly changes things. Might you be inclined to break bread with me tomorrow? There are matters of profound consequence to discuss." As I hung up, a notification appeared. An email from another client, asking if the rumors of my departure were true. Then another message from a junior colleague I'd mentored, expressing confusion and concern. I set my phone aside and opened my laptop. Instead of job hunting, I found myself creating a new document. At the top, I typed, "Client Contact Lexicon." From memory, I began recording every client relationship I'd built over 3 years. Names, preferences, pain points, project histories, information that lived in my head, etched onto the very sinews of my memory, not in the company database. Details no non-compete could ever take from me. By evening, I had 4 pages of notes and a burning conviction. I wouldn't sign the non-compete. I wouldn't melt into the shadows of ignominy. Serafina thought she'd eliminated a threat. Instead, she'd unleashed a force she could not comprehend. As the sun set, my phone lit up with a notification. A text message from an unknown number. "Ilara, this is Lena from the office. Something weird is happening with the Blackwood account. Serafina can't find her notes, and the client is asking questions she can't answer. Where did you keep the Blackwood files?" I stared at the message, a slow warmth spreading through me. It had been exactly 24 hours since my unceremonious dismissal, and already, things were starting to disintegrate. I didn't reply to Lena's message. Instead, I watched as my phone lit up with 3 more notifications in quick succession. "Ilara, it's important.
Please call me."
Serafina is freaking out. The Blackwood implementation meeting is tomorrow. The implementation meeting, of course. The true crucible where promises forged during negotiations had to be translated into actionable reality. The part one usually handled. I set my phone face down on the table and made myself a cup of tea. Lena Vance watched me from the doorway of her small kitchen. "A ghost of a smile plays on your lips, Ilara," she observed. "A rare bloom." "Just thinking about something," I replied, stirring honey into my cup. "About how quickly they realize they need you," she supplied, her shrewd expression unwavering. Lena Vance had survived an abusive marriage, immigrated to a new country alone with a child, and built a business from nothing. She understood more about the brutal calculus of control than most corporate executives. "Something like that," I admitted. She nodded and returned to her sewing room, where she now wove magic from fabric and thread for local theatrical productions, not because she needed the money anymore, but because she loved creating beautiful things. The next morning, I met Julian Blackwood at a bastion of quiet opulence downtown. He greeted me with a firm handshake and concerned eyes. "I checked into the situation," he said after we ordered, "spoke with some board members I know. This wasn't a downsizing." "I'm aware," I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite the cold fury still simmering beneath my calm exterior. "What happened yesterday at the implementation meeting was—" He paused, searching for the right word. "A damning revelation. Your replacement seemed unfamiliar with the most basic elements of our agreement." "Anya," I offered, the name a bitter taste. "She's new, very new," Julian agreed. "And your former boss struggled to answer questions about the custom logistics module you designed for us. The one that was the deciding factor in our signing with your firm." I sipped my water, waiting. "I'll be direct, Ilara. We signed with your firm because of you. The board was impressed with your understanding of our operations and your creative solutions. Now we're concerned about implementation." He slid a business card across the table. "I'd like to hire you as an independent consultant to oversee the transition. Whatever your former firm was paying you, I'll double her paltry offering." My heart raced. This was a sudden, blinding flare of opportunity handed to me less than 48 hours after being unceremoniously fired. But something felt off. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm concerned about potential conflicts. I haven't signed the non-compete agreement yet, but We've already consulted our legal team," Julian interrupted. "Since you were terminated without cause, and since we approached you rather than the other way around, any non-compete would be difficult to enforce. Besides," he smiled, "we're not asking you to take our business elsewhere. We're asking you to ensure we get what we paid for from your former employer." It was elegant, a stroke of genius, cloaked in corporate diplomacy. I would still be working on the Blackwood account, but now as their representative rather than Serafina's. I would be in meetings with my former colleagues, presiding over their floundering. "I'll need to think about it," I said, though my mind was already racing with possibilities. "Of course," he agreed. "But don't think too long. We have another implementation meeting scheduled for Friday." As we finished lunch, my phone buzzed with another digital plea from Serafina. Where are the Blackwood implementation templates? This is urgent. I tucked my phone away without responding and thanked Julian for lunch. On the drive home, I called Marcus Sterling, a legal eagle from my university days who specialized in employment law. They can enforce a non-compete if you haven't signed it, he confirmed after hearing my situation. And terminating you immediately after you landed a major client would make any judge suspicious. Want me to review any paperwork they send? Please, I agreed. And one more thing. If I were to start my own consulting business, what should I know? His advice was thorough and practical. By the time I arrived home, I had a to-do list that included forging my own banner, establishing my own coffers, and constructing my digital fortress. 3 days after being fired, I had accomplished all three. I named my consultancy Vance Ascendant and created a simple, professional website highlighting my expertise in client relations and implementation management. I made no mention of specific clients or projects from my previous employment. That same day, I accepted Julian Blackwood's offer. The first implementation meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Friday at my former office building. I adorned myself for battle that morning. A charcoal gray suit I'd never worn to the office before. Subtle makeup, my hair styled differently than my usual work look. Small changes that added up to a new image. Alara, the architect of her own destiny, not the pliable subordinate. The security guard did a double take when I approached the front desk. Miss Vance. I'm here for the Blackwood implementation meeting, I explained, presenting Julian's business card. I'm consulting for them now. His eyebrows shot up as he made a quick call, then handed me a visitor badge. 15th floor conference room. The elevator ride gave me time to anchor my resolve. When the doors opened on 15, I nearly collided with Damien from legal, whose face was a tableau of startled disbelief, coffee sloshing in his cup. Alara, he sputtered. What are you doing here? Reclaiming, I replied simply, walking past him toward the conference room. I arrived 5 minutes early, but Julian and 2 members of his team were already there, along with Lena and Silas from marketing. Their expressions when they saw me ranged from stunned recognition, Silas, to cautious relief, Lena. Alara will be overseeing the implementation from our side, Julian announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Lena's eyes widened. Silas studied his tablet intently. At precisely 10 a.m., Serafina swept into the room, a storm front disguised as tailored elegance, followed by Kale and a young woman I assumed was Anya. Serafina stopped dead when she saw me, her practiced smile a brittle mask, freezing in place. What in the blazes is the meaning of this? She asked, her voice low but sharp. Ms. Vance is representing Blackwood Shipping's interests during implementation, Julian explained smoothly. Given her intimate knowledge of the project, we felt it was a pragmatic measure to safeguard our investment. Serafina's face cycled through several expressions before settling on a tight smile. How ingenious of you, Julian. The meeting proceeded with excruciating awkwardness. Anya, clearly, was adrift in a sea of jargon, demonstrating no understanding of the complex logistics module I designed. Serafina kept interrupting to clarify points that only confused matters further. Kale, from accounting, sought solace in the glowing screen of his device, repeatedly checking his phone, as if hoping for rescue. Through it all, I maintained a sphinx-like composure, asking pointed questions when necessary and taking careful notes. I didn't need to revel in vindictive satisfaction. The situation was weaving its own narrative of consequence. After 2 painful hours, Julian called for a break. As people filed out for coffee, Serafina prowled to my side by the window. Clever move, she hissed. But if you think this little stunt will work... This isn't a stunt, I interrupted calmly. This is business. Blackwood hired me to protect their investment. I'm simply doing my job. You're trying to sabotage me. No, Serafina. You authored this downfall yourself. When you fired the only person who fully understood this project. Her eyes narrowed. I've sculpted this empire from dust. Do you really think a single client, however prominent, could dismantle my legacy? I don't want to take you down, I replied truthfully. I just want to ensure Blackwood gets what they paid for. It wasn't entirely a lie. I didn't want to destroy Serafina or the company. I just wanted justice, and perhaps the long overdue recognition of my inherent value. As the meeting reconvened, I noticed Lena watching me with a flicker of burgeoning reverence. Even Silas seemed impressed by my composure. By the end of the day, we had a revised implementation schedule that would require twice-weekly meetings, all of which I would attend as Blackwood's representative. Well handled, Julian said as we left the building together. Though I admit the sheer dramatic spectacle was almost worth your fee alone. I smiled politely, but didn't engage with the joke. This wasn't about reveling in Serafina's public abasement, satisfying as that might be. This was about staking my claim as a sovereign entity. Over the next 2 weeks, my phone continued to hum with digital distress signals from my former workplace. Not just from Lena now, but from other colleagues seeking information about clients, systems, and processes that only I fully understood. I answered when I could, always polite, but increasingly brief. My priority was establishing my own business, not solving their problems for free. Julian Blackwood, a man of quiet power, emerged not merely as a client, but as a steadfast champion. He mentioned my services to other business owners in his network, describing me as the indispensable architect of salvage who saved our implementation. 3 weeks after starting my consultancy, I signed my second client. A week later, a third, testament to my burgeoning reputation. Meanwhile, the foundations of Serafina's dominion began to crack. Silas, who had become an unlikely confidant, kept me informed through occasional texts. Second implementation meeting. Disaster. Client threatening to pull out. Serafina presented your logistics model as her own. Couldn't answer basic questions about how it works. 3 people quit marketing department yesterday. I took no undue pleasure in their agonizing throes. Well, perhaps a small amount where Serafina was concerned, but I remained focused on building something new rather than watching something old crumble. 6 weeks after my firing, I signed the lease on a modest sanctuary overlooking the sprawling urban labyrinth downtown. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms with large windows and enough space for a desk, meeting table, and small kitchenette. But it was mine. No intrusive glass walls for others to peer through. No venomous politics. No looming shadow of Serafina. My mother helped me move in, arranging my sparse furniture with the same care she once arranged fabric in her atelier. You need plants, she declared, surveying the empty corners. Life, my dear, demands the vibrant tenacity of growing things. The next day, she arrived with 3 potted plants, hardy, low-maintenance varieties that could survive my irregular attention. One was an emerald offshoot from the succulent that had been unceremoniously dumped into a garbage bag on the day of my firing. I'd managed to salvage it, and now its offspring would preside over the nascent dawn of my new empire. That afternoon, as I was setting up my new computer system, my phone chimed with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Alara Vance?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Helena Albright. I'm the board chair at your former employer." My hand tightened around the phone. The board chair? In 6 weeks of escalating drama, the board had never been mentioned. "What can I do for you, Ms. Albright?" "I think we should meet in person," she replied. "There are some matters we need to discuss regarding your departure from the company and your current relationship with Blackwood Shipping." My stomach clenched. Had Serafina finally convinced the board to take legal action against me? "I'm available tomorrow afternoon," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing thoughts. "Perfect. My assistant will send the details." After we hung up, I immediately called Marcus Sterling for legal advice. He agreed to accompany me to the meeting and spent an hour reviewing my situation, the absence of a signed non-compete after my termination, the emails authorizing my independent work, the brutal circumstances of my firing. "Legally, you're on solid ground," he concluded. But board chairs, especially those of Helena Albright's stature, did not descend to departmental squabbles. Something bigger is happening. The meeting was set for 2 p.m. the next day at a secluded alcove within a discreet, opulent hotel downtown. When Marcus and I arrived, we found not just Helena Albright, but 3 other board members waiting for us. No sign of Serafina. Helena, a woman of formidable presence, her silver bob a pristine helmet, her eyes piercing, stood to greet us. "Thank you for coming, Miss Vance, and you've brought counsel. Very prudent." She gestured to the others. "This is informal, but we thought it important to meet face to face." We settled around the table, and Helena wasted no time getting to the point. "We've been conducting an exhaustive post-mortem of recent events in the Client Relations Department," she began. "What we found is concerning." One of the board members, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, slid a folder across the table. "This contains documentation of systematic credit pilfering, client relationship interference, and potentially discriminatory termination practices," he explained. "All centering around your former supervisor, Serafina Donovan." I opened the folder to find emails, meeting minutes, and performance reviews. A damning evidentiary ledger showing how Serafina had consistently siphoned off the accolades for my efforts, deliberately kept me from certain high-profile meetings, and premeditated my professional demise weeks before the Blackwood triumph was even finalized. "We became aware of these issues only after multiple client complaints following your departure," Helena continued. "Blackwood Shipping was simply the most vocal. Others have expressed similar concerns about continuity and account management." I glanced at Marcus, who gave me a subtle nod to continue listening. "Why are you sharing this with me?" I asked carefully. Helena exchanged looks with her colleagues before answering. "We have two proposals for your consideration. First, we'd like to offer you your position back with a substantial promotion, salary increase, and a direct conduit to the executive pantheon, circumventing Ms. Donovan's poisoned orbit entirely." The offer hung in the air like an unexpected, dizzying gift. 6 weeks ago, I would have jumped at the chance. Now, I waited for the inevitable descent of the other, heavier shoe. "And the second proposal?" Helena smiled slightly. "Alternatively, we'd like to discuss acquiring your consultancy." That I had not expected. "You want to buy my 6-week-old business?" "We want to subsume your undeniable prowess and client relationships before our competitors do," corrected the woman sitting beside Helena. "Your departure has revealed significant vulnerabilities in our client management structure. Several major accounts are now at risk." Marcus leaned forward. "Before we discuss either option, we need clarity on Ms. Vance's legal standing. There have been threats of litigation regarding non-compete violations." "Those threats were not authorized by the board," Helena said firmly. "And they will not be pursued regardless of your decision today." For the next hour, we discussed details of both proposals. The return offer included a director-level position with a salary double my previous one. The acquisition offer included a generous upfront payment plus a 3-year consulting contract. "We'll need time to consider," Marcus said as the meeting concluded. "Of course," Helena agreed. "But we would appreciate an answer within the week. The situation remains fluid." Outside the hotel, Marcus and I dissected the meeting. "They're desperate," he observed. "Blackwood was just the tip of the iceberg. They're losing clients left and right without you." "But why acquisition? Why not just hire me back?" "Because they know you might leave again. This way, they lock in your expertise and eliminate a formidable future rival in one move." I spent the next 3 days navigating the labyrinthine corridors of choice. The money was tempting. Either offer would set me up financially for years. But returning meant working in the same crucible that had so cruelly forged my current strength. Acquisition meant ceding the hard-won sovereignty of my fledgling empire before I'd truly experienced it. There was also the matter of Serafina. Neither option had clarified her status. Though reading between the lines, it seemed the board was meticulously weaving the silken cords for her eventual corporate strangulation. On the third day, as I sat in my new office, staring at the contract drafts Marcus had prepared, my phone rang. Julian Blackwood again. "Alara, have you heard the news?" "What news?" "Your former employer just lost the Sterling Aegis account. It's all over the industry forums." Sterling Aegis was their second largest client after Blackwood, a relationship that predated even Serafina's time at the company. "What happened?" I asked, genuinely shocked. "Apparently, there was a major service failure last week." No one could access the specialized reporting portal your team had built for them. When they called for support, they got a runaround. He paused. Word is they're looking for new consultants. I may have mentioned your name. After we hung up, I sat in silence, processing this development. The Sterling Aegis account represented millions in annual revenue. Its loss would be devastating, possibly fatal for Serafina's department. My phone buzzed with a text from Silas. Total meltdown here. Serafina called emergency all hands. Sterling Aegis gone, blaming everyone but herself. Another piece clicked into place. The board's urgency suddenly made perfect sense. That evening, I made my decision. I called Helena Albright directly. I've considered both offers, I told her, and I have a counterproposal. 2 days later, I walked into my former office building, not as a visitor or consultant, but as the newly crowned architect of Client Ascension, a division created specifically for me that would operate in a sovereign sphere parallel to Serafina's department, yet inextricably linked, with unfettered oversight of all critical account implementations. The announcement had been made company-wide an hour earlier. Employees stared as I crossed the lobby, a sea of stunned faces parting before me, a ripple of hushed awe and cautious speculation following in my wake. The security guard grinned and handed me a new access card, not a visitor badge. Welcome home, Architect Vance. I took the elevator to the rarefied heights of the executive floor, 2 levels above my previous department. My new office awaited, with panoramic windows overlooking the city and my name emblazoned, a beacon of my arrival, already on the door. Inside, I found Helena Albright waiting. Everything to your satisfaction? She asked. It's a promising overture, I replied, setting down my bag. The transition team is ready whenever you are. They're eager to hear your plans for the Sterling Aegis Resurrection Protocol. I'll meet them this afternoon. First, I need to address my former department. Helena raised an eyebrow but nodded. Of course. They're convened in the War Room, Conference A, for Serafina's emergency meeting. Perfect timing. 10 minutes later, I stood outside Conference Room A, listening to Serafina's voice through the door as she outlined desperate measures to prevent further client defections. We must all pull together to weather this storm. I've prepared individual client retention assignments. I pushed open the massive oak doors. The room fell silent. 20 faces turned toward me, some confused, others hopeful, a few wary. Serafina stood frozen mid-sentence at the head of the table, a presentation clicker, an anachronism in her trembling grip, her meticulously crafted facade barely concealing the ravages of weeks of self-inflicted chaos. Ilara, she managed, her voice a strangled gasp, quickly regaining a semblance of its former composure. I heard about your new position. Congratulations. We were just discussing emergency measures for Sterling Aegis. I am intimately aware of the desperate machinations unfolding here, I interrupted calmly, moving to stand at the opposing head of the polished mahogany table. And I'm here to inform you that all critical client retention initiatives shall henceforth be routed through the newly established division of Client Ascension. Serafina's smile tightened, a brittle shard of contempt. Perhaps we should confer on this transition in a more discreet setting? After this meeting, there's nothing left to discuss, I replied, my voice cool steel. The board, in its infinite wisdom, has ratified my comprehensive restructuring mandate, effective immediately. Your team will continue handling new business development, but implementation and retention for all existing clients now falls under my purview. The room erupted in whispers. Serafina's face flushed with anger and humiliation, the same emotions I'd felt standing in the lobby with my belongings in garbage bags. This is completely inappropriate, she hissed. You can't just waltz in. And actually I cut her off. It's all outlined in the memo that went out this morning. I'm surprised you haven't read it yet. I turned to address the room. Everyone who worked directly on implementation and client management should report to the executive conference room in 30 minutes for reassignment. That meant nearly everyone present. Serafina's department would be gutted, left with just her and a few sales associates. Her once formidable dominion, now a hollowed husk. As people gathered their things, expressions ranging from shocked bewilderment to gleeful liberation, I approached Serafina directly. "Do not fret, Serafina," I murmured, my voice a silken blade, audible only to her. "You're not being fired. The board felt that would be too untidy. You'll keep your ornamental title, your gilded cage of an office. You just won't have much to do besides basic sales. No client interface, no strategic oversight, no loyal cadre to command." The color drained from her face as she realized the full implications. This is your retribution, isn't it, Alara? Your meticulously crafted vengeance. You played us all, a master puppeteer. I smiled. The same calm, knowing smile I'd given her from my car that day in the parking garage. "I didn't orchestrate anything, Serafina. I simply cultivated my own garden. Everything else is just the inexorable consequence of your own strategic miscalculations." I gestured to the nearly empty room. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and don't trouble yourself with seeking refuge in this industry. I haven't said a negative word about you to anyone. I haven't had to. Your legacy, however, has preceded you, unfettered by my influence." In the hallway, I took a slow, deliberate inhalation. This wasn't about sadism or petty retribution. This was equilibrium. Serafina would keep her job and salary, just as I'd been left with mine. But she would know every sunrise that her power was gone, her influence a mere wisp of smoke, her future a stagnant pond. She would sit in her glass mausoleum, watching as I rebuilt what she had tried to destroy. She would bear witness as the very clients who once dismissed her now clamored for my attention. She would observe her former lieutenants, now my trusted vanguard, flourish under my leadership. And she would understand, finally, truly comprehend, that the seemingly unassuming woman she had so carelessly cast aside had been the very keystone of their crumbling edifice. My retribution was not the destruction of her reign. My vengeance was to ascend where she had decreed my fall. My vengeance was to become the undeniable, blazing truth. Within half a turn of the Earth's orbit, our client retention, a phoenix from the ashes of neglect, rose from 68% to 97%. Implementation complaints, once a torrent, dwindled to a trickle, nearing zero. The sterling Aegis Titan returned, along with 3 others that had been considering departure. Our team expanded, adding specialties and capabilities that attracted a vibrant tapestry of new ventures across diverse sectors. Serafina remained, a spectral presence in her glass mausoleum, handling basic sales calls and preparing reports that few people read. She never quit. That would have been a final, desperate act of defiance. Instead, she adapted to her shrunken domain, occasionally attempting to insert herself into client relationships, but finding no traction. A year to the day after I found my belongings in garbage bags, the board promoted me to chief client architect, a bespoke seat at the very summit of power, created to recognize the transformation I'd led. The announcement was made at the annual company meeting, with Serafina sitting in the back row, her applause a hollow echo among the genuine roar. As I took the stage to accept, our gazes, briefly, locked across the chasm of our divergent fates. There was no lingering spark of fury there anymore, just a quiet, chilling capitulation. Her gravest miscalculation hadn't been firing me. It had been her fatal blindness to the nascent power within. That evening, as I prepared to leave my office, I found a small package on my desk. A nascent succulent, its emerald leaves unfurling, with a simple note, "From one resilient spirit to another. Lena." I placed it on my windowsill beside the offspring of my original office plant, the one that had been dumped in a garbage bag, yet somehow, like me, not merely endured, but blossomed, mirroring my own relentless ascent. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, retribution, and the profound symphony of professional triumph, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping narratives of the unyielding spirit of human ascendancy. What would you have done in Alara's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the truest retribution is not the ruin of another, but the unassailable construction of one's own undeniable legacy.